I used to love waking up in the morning to the sunrise in my face. In 2010, I lived in this condo where the large bedroom windows at my feet faced due east into the morning sunrise. It would awaken me into this grateful state of having a new day. But not this particular morning. I would wake up, see the sunrise, and instead of grateful, I felt dread in the idea of another day in this new world of pain and suffering. This wasn't supposed to be my life. I had spent too much time and intention crafting a life worth living for this to be the result. I thought I had done everything right. I left my comfortable corporate career path, and then I took up a low-paying contract position with a successful real estate investor, looking at that like my real-world MBA. And then I struck out on my own, found a mentor who had been in real estate longer than I've even been alive, and I started on my own, and I raised a fund of just over $1 million in under 8 months to begin investing in real estate projects nationwide. I had this ambitious goal to create financial freedom for the family that I was so looking forward to create next. Instead, the Great Recession of 2008 had squashed my plans. Instead of building, I found myself barely holding it together, trying to weather that financial storm. I would tell myself the same investor song and dance that sometimes markets take a dip, we can't control that. Investments will sometimes take longer than expected to pay out, but real estate always holds its value, and we just need to hold on another month. And another month came, and another month. I kept telling myself the same song and dance, but then I had to start telling my investors. And then I started living on credit cards. I was getting scared. Growing up, a latchkey kid to a single working mom, it wasn't in my blood to do something like this on this scale, trading perceived job security for risky entrepreneurialism. My awakening in those days was to a gut-wrenching pain of fear, anxiety, and bewilderment. I was especially afraid to fail the friends and family who believed in and then invested with me. Like most of us, I didn't understand the magnitude of the economic bubble that was bursting at that time. In the moment, I was just paralyzed by fear. Have you ever had the moment where you didn't know what to do, where the damage has already been done, and any next move could be the wrong move, making it even worse, and the fear of that whole situation just leaves you stuck in place? In psychology, there is a polyvagal theory that, in summary, introduces a third option in the fight or flight scenario, which is to simply freeze, or let's call it surrender, if just for the moment. Think of a gazelle caught by a lion. If caught, the gazelle will often play dead while being carried back to the lion cubs, looking for any opportune moment to make a move and get out of there. There is an evolutionary advantage in surrendering, because for the gazelle to thrash about in the jaws of the lion will only cause further hurt and trauma. It gives itself a chance at living another day because it simply surrendered. In my situation, I froze, but it wasn't out of an evolutionary surrender. It was out of an existential panic. I was creating more suffering on top of the suffering generated by the external thing. And eventually I got to this point where I had to make a move, any move. I just gave myself a chore to do, to get out of the damn house. I just went to Starbucks. I journaled about my situation. It put me around other people who had their own lives in motion and were oblivious to my little existential panic. And that helped me surrender a little bit. And I had this thought stream that sun's going to rise and it's going to set and it's going to do its thing regardless of whether I sit here in my little victim bucket of despair. And it's going to do its thing over billions of other people, the majority of whom have far greater and more fundamental problems than I have. And that helped me surrender a little bit more and take a bigger step. I surrendered to the idea that to the truth that the business and investments were really lost, and I started the bankruptcy process. I felt like an incredible failure. I punished myself for a good chunk of my 30s, falling back and tripping into the fear that just anything, the next thing that I put my name on, that I committed to, would also just blow up in my face. I had to separate my self-worth from the business failure and realize that I hadn't done anything intentionally wrong. I didn't swindle my friends and family out of their money and then go spend it on fast cars and yacht vacations. Money went into investments. In the paperwork, there's a chapter or a section called risks, and in there is unforeseen economic circumstances and acts of God. And as we all know, that's exactly where we were at that point in time. At the heart of it were these subprime mortgage-backed securities and default credit swaps that tanked the global economy. And it was perpetrated by institutions that were supposed to be safeguarding and driving that reliability in the real estate market, right? But we all know that's not what happened. There's this saying, right, that goes, the tsunami tide sinks all ships, something like that. Either way, maybe it's the opposite, but either way, my little paddle boat was no contest. After those 5 years of punishing myself, I finally just had to let it go. And it was January 15 by that point. I was turning 38, and I had this voice in my head that just said, "You are running out of time." So my buddy and I went camping and hiking and getting a little wet down the California coast. I used that time to reset, and I just set out 3 simple goals: grow my business, walk my dog in the morning, and focus on triathlon training. These 3 simple goals kept me narrowly focused on creating wins to just build momentum again. And indeed, they did. This process for digging out from insurmountable challenge is my idea worth sharing. 3 steps. The first is to just surrender. Give yourself permission to just be in it for a while. Be okay with being the gazelle in the jaws of pain, anxiety, or fear. Recognize you're human. You're living a life, and this is the true, inalienable right we have. Resisting both the event and the feelings that come with it are futile wastes of energy. When ready to be done, just exhale and let it all go. That part you might have to do a few times. I did. Second, find what you can be grateful for. If you have trouble finding what you can be grateful for, start with those simple things that we take for granted. It could be the fresh mountain air. It could be that cup of morning coffee. It could be toilet paper next to the toilet. In my goals, my walking my dog in the morning was an act of gratitude, and I literally thought to myself, I get to walk up a hill, the long and steep one, in San Francisco where I lived at the time, to this hilltop parklet where I watched the sunrise over the city before everyone was awake and making noise. Every day. Gratitude has this phenomenal way of getting us outside of ourselves, regardless of the state that we might be in. Third is to figure out one step to take forward. For me, in that past situation, it was just to get out of the damn house, go to Starbucks. And when you've completed that task, be sure to give yourself kudos, click your own like button, and activate your own dopamine. And then figure out the next step and the next step. Eventually, you'll look up and see progress you've made towards taking bigger and bigger steps. I have a great example of this in my triathlon training where I began the year barely surviving 20-mile rides to loving 50-mile rides to completing a sprint distance triathlon to then going on to a middle distance Olympic race and then setting my sights like a crazy person on a half IRONMAN race where you swim 1.2 miles and then bike 56 miles and then do a half marathon, 13.1 miles, all in one race. What you may find in this process, what I found in this process, is that we can build up an arsenal of mental Aikido moves to sidestep and not waste time on the pain and anxiety that come with the next round of adversity. As we have discovered, even in this last year, the true and inalienable right we have is to change and challenge. And if you don't have a toolbox of tools to use and cope, you're just setting yourself up for a world of hurt. I had mentioned that in 2015, I was going on to that half Ironman race. Well, the weekend before the race, on our last training ride, in the best shape of my life, exactly 20 minutes after this very picture was taken, I lost control of my bike. I was on an infamous section of Lucas Valley Road in Marin, north of San Francisco. Locals there know it very, very well. I was going too fast into a downhill curve, and I lost control of my bike. I went over the side of the hill, and I fell 20 feet, landing flat on my back. The impact broke my left collarbone, cracked most of my ribs on my left side, collapsed my left lung, and burst my L1 vertebrae. After a 6-hour surgery the next day, putting my spine back together, I woke up. My awakening in the ICU bed was to a beautiful panoramic view of the Marin foothills, including the one that literally broke my back. Unable to turn away or sit up and pull the curtain, I had to watch that sunrise and sunset over that hill. Except this time I knew there was nothing for me in laying there, mentally paralyzed by fear. I had already wasted a good chunk of my life. I wasn't going to waste another 5 years. So instead of laying there mentally paralyzed by fear, I thought, why would I stack mental paralysis on top of the physical paralysis that I now get to enjoy? No, I knew that sun would rise and that sun would set. It wouldn't care about my situation, whether it be economic collapse, burst vertebrae, or toilet paper reserves. I was surrounded by an amazing tribe of friends and family who brought me almond milk lattes in the morning and milkshakes whenever I needed a boost. And I had an amazing team of doctors and nurses and physical therapists who never let me succumb to the pain. I had a brain that was still producing thoughts, hopes, and dreams. I was still breathing despite the collapsed lung. So I set out, and I remember actually the day before the race, actually the day of the race, my friends took Sharpies to their arms and they tattooed themselves. And they made signs dedicating the race to me, and they sent me text messages all day during the race. And it was awesome. And it pissed me off that I couldn't be there, actually. And it made me vow to race again within a year. I'd already lived through my worst nightmare. I had my mental Aikido moves. And so I got to work. And that next year, I didn't do just one. I did 3 sprint triathlons. The year after that, I rode that hill I crashed on in a hand cycle. And I do it every year, and I've done it almost every year since. The year after that, I did the LA Marathon in a racing wheelchair. And I crossed the finish line at my first Half IRONMAN in Oceanside near San Diego. I also, that year, I met a woman. The year after that, we fell in love. We bought a house. We went to another Half Ironman in Lubbock, Texas, where I qualified for the Half IRONMAN World Championships in Nice, France, which we traveled to, and I raced later that year. I continued to train despite this pandemic. My next race will be a full-distance Ironman triathlon, hopefully this year. Now, let me be the first to tell you, I'm no world-class triathlete. I'm not breaking any land speed records. I've actually failed at more Half Ironmans than I've even completed. But the truth is that doesn't matter. What matters is this, and I'm going to leave you with this question. Most of us have the ability to choose our response when adversity strikes, and adversity will strike, sooner and later, big and small. Do we choose the victim bucket, where we thrash about in those jaws of pain, fear, and anxiety? Or do we choose the perseverance bucket, where we know that pain, fear, and anxiety are just normal and temporary if we surrender to the experience? Whichever you choose, another day is coming. It's another day for you to choose your own adventure. Thank you.